Hello students, in this session we shall discuss module 46. It deals with increase in factor supply in sector specific model. The validity of Heckscher-Ohlin model was put into doubt by Leontief paradox. Another objection was raised by Maggie with respect to the assumption of Heckscher-Ohlin model tells that factors of mobile are perfectly mobile between sectors of a country, although they are completely immobile across different countries. Maggie put objection about the mobility of factors of production across different sectors of a country. This is because some factors are suitable for the use of the production of any particular commodity. So those factors cannot be transferred from one sector or industry to another sector or industry. These factors are called specific factors. We can take the example of workers. Workers who are specialized in making clothes cannot be absorbed in software industry. On the other hand, if we consider the factor capital, then it is quite natural that the type of capital that is required to produce computers, that is of no use in textile industry. So specific factors are those factors that are stuck in one industry, and those factors cannot be transferred from one industry to another industry due to changes in market condition. Now the specific factor model was originally discussed by Jacob Wiener, but it was formalized mathematically by Ronald W. Jones in the year 1971. The model's name refers to its distinguishing feature that one factor of production is specific to one industry. Next, what are the assumptions of this model? Here, an economy is assumed with two goods and two factors of production mainly. Now, the two factors are capital and labor. Perfect competition is assumed in both product market and factor market. Now, with respect to capital, it is assumed that capital is specific to one industry. That means capital cannot be transferred from one industry to another industry. But labor is assumed to be perfectly mobile between two industries. Now, if we assume that capital is immobile across sectors, then it is reasonable to assume that there are three factors of production in the economy. Labor is the mobile factor, and there are two types of capital in the economy. There is one type of capital that is used specifically in one industry, and another type of capital is there that is used specifically in another industry. So here, two types of capital are not substitutable. They are actually differentiated. So what we get ultimately, we get the economy is composed of two sectors producing two goods with three factors of production, one mobile factor and two specific factors for the two industries. Now, these assumptions place the sector-specific model squarely between immobile factor model and Heckscher-Ohlin model. In immobile factor model, all the factors of production are completely immobile across sectors, and in Heckscher-Ohlin model, all the factors of production are completely mobile between sectors. So we can interpret the immobile factor model results as short-run effects, Heckscher-Ohlin model results at long-run effect, and sector-specific factor model as medium-term effects. Now, it is assumed that the economy is endowed with a particular level of mobile factor labor, and each specific capital is also fixed in supply in the economy. full employment of all the factors are assumed. For the mobile factor, it is assumed that the sum of labor employment in the two industries is just equal to the given endowment level of labor. Now suppose the two commodities that are produced in the economy, they are X and Y commodities. Their production involves labor and one specific type of capital. Supply of capital as well as labor are fixed in the economy, and labor is completely mobile between X and Y industries, but each industry employs a specific type of capital. Now, as labor is completely mobile between the sectors, wage rate in the economy is same for the two industries. Equality of wage rate in the two industries is possible because of the perfect mobility of labor between X and Y industries. This can be illustrated with the help of this diagram. Here, along the horizontal axis, we measure labor endowment level of the economy. The given endowment level of labor is LL1. This is the total supply of labor in the economy, LL1. Along the vertical axis, we measure wage. Here, we draw two downward sloping curves, XX and YY. These two curves are the VMPL curves for X industry and Y industry respectively. Now, VMPL is the value of marginal product of labor. This is the product of price of the commodity with the marginal productivity of labor in that industry. Now, given the price of the commodity in the market, marginal productivity of labor declines with the increase in the employment of labor in a particular industry. Due to diminishing marginal productivity of labor, VMPL curve is downward sloping. So, here both XS and YY curves are downward sloping. In this diagram, the supply of labor for X industry is measured along the horizontal axis to the right of L point, and labor employment level in Y industry is measured along the horizontal axis to leftward from L1 point. Now, in X industry, labor employment level will increase so long as wage rate falls short of VMPL in X industry. Now, employment level of labor will stop in X industry right at that point when wage rate will be just equal to value of marginal productivity of labor in that industry. This is true for the Y industry also. So, in Y industry also, employment level of labor will stop when the equality condition W equal to VMPL Y will be established. So, when the equality condition between wage rate and VMPL is satisfied, we get wage rate will be equal for the two industries, and that is obtained by the intersection point between the two VMPL curves for the two industries. In this diagram, that intersection point is R, and corresponding to this intersection point, we get that the equal wage rate that will prevail in the economy in the two industries is of the value RS, and at this wage rate, LS amount of labor will be employed in industry X, and L1S amount of labor will be employed in industry Y. So, wage rate get equalized in the two industries by the free movement of labor between the two sectors or industries. Next, we assume one specific example for this sector-specific model. We assume that two commodities, computers and textiles, are produced in an economy. Production of computer requires labor and one specific type of capital denoted by KC. Now, RC can be used as the rate of return on specific type of capital to the computer industry. Next, we assume that textiles are produced with the help of labor and specific capital KT, and price of this specific capital is RT. Now, the specific factor model in this case can be denoted or expressed with the help of the zero profit conditions, least cost input choices, and full employment conditions. Here, equations 1 and 2 represent the zero profit conditions for computer industry and textile industry respectively. The third equation represents the least cost input choice, as here input coefficient depends on factor price ratio. Equations 4, 5 and 6 represent the full employment conditions for the factors. Equation 4 denotes that use of labor in the two industries sums up to just the labor endowment in the economy. Equation 5 ensures the equality between supply and demand for the specific capital used in computer industry, and equation 6 denotes the demand supply equality condition for the specific capital used in textile industry. We now assume an increase in the stock of capital that is specific to the textile industry, keeping all other variables at a constant level. Now, when the stock of capital specific to the textile industry increases, the VMPL curve for the textile industry shifts upward. Look at this diagram. Here, originally, the VMPL curve for the textile industry is VMPLT, and due to increase in the stock of capital, specific capital to the textile industry, this curve shifts rightward to VMPLT prime. Now, originally, equilibrium wage rate in the economy was at W star, but due to rightward shift of the VMPLT curve, the wage rate increases in the economy. Along with that, we see that employment level of labor in textile industry increases by S star A amount. Now, if there occurs increase in wage, given the product prices, there will be fall in the rate of return on specific capital for the textile industry. That means due to rise in W, RT will fall. So, this will increase the wage rental ratio. So, employers will use more capital intensive technique of production. So, AKT hat will be positive. Now, from the full employment condition for the specific capital for the textile industry, we get this relation KT hat is equal to XT hat plus AKT hat. Now, we have just found AKT hat is greater than 0. So, from this expression, we get KT hat is greater than XT hat, that is greater than 0. So, there will be expansion of textile production, but the expansion of textile production will be less than proportional to the rise in specific capital of the textile industry. Now, when wage rate in the textile industry rises, some labor will move out from the other sector, that is computer sector. So, computer sector will contract. So, what we get ultimately, we get that KT hat greater than XT hat greater than 0, that is equal to KC hat and L hat, because there is no change in specific capital for computer sector and labor endowment level, and they are greater than XC hat. That means XC hat is actually negative. We have seen that computer sector contracts. So, we find that relative supply of that good increases, the supply of the specific factor of that good if increases. Here, due to increase in the specific capital for the textile industry, we have obtained expansion of the textile industry. But it is also true that the expansion of textile production is less than proportional to the increase in the stock of specific capital for that sector. So output magnification effect does not hold here, as not all output changes are more than proportional to the endowment factor endowment changes. Next, we assume an increase in the mobile factor labor. For that, we consider this diagram. Here, we see that the endowment of labor increases by L1, L2. Previously, endowment level of labor was LL1 and now it is LL2. For that, the VMPL curve for the textile industry shifts from the position TT to T1, T1. And we get increase in the employment of labor in both the industries. In computer industry, it increases from LS to LS1. So increase in labor employment level in computer industry is of the amount S1. And similarly, increase in employment level of labor in textile industry is S1, S2. And we see here that wage rate falls from RS to R1, S1. Now, due to increase in employment levels of labor in both these sectors, we get expansion of production in both industries. Now, as wage rate falls due to increase in the supply of mobile factor, given the product prices, the rates of return on these specific type of capitals will fall in both industries. So there will be decrease in the wage rental ratio, and this induces producers to employ more labor intensive techniques and less capital intensive techniques. Now, what happens to the relative supply of the goods? That is not unambiguous. It is observed that if the elasticity of substitution between the two factors in textile industry is greater than that of the computer industry, then due to fall in the wage rental ratio, at the margin capital will be substituted for labor more in textile industry than in computer industry. So more capital will be released from textile industry to be used for scale expansion in textile industry. So ultimately we get increase in the production level of textile industry more than that of the computer industry. So in that case, relative supply of textiles will rise in the economy. On the other hand, if we find that elasticity of substitution between the two factors is greater in computer industry than that in textile industry, then labor will be substituted by capital more by the computer industry than the textile industry. So more capital will be released by the computer industry in this case, and that can be used for scale expansion. So in this case, supply of capital will rise more than that of textile. So in this case, relative supply of computer will increase in the economy. we find that the effect of an increase in the supply of mobile factor on the relative supply of the good is ambiguous. Due to rise in the factor endowment level of the factor labor, wage rate falls and rates of return on the specific capital increases. So wage rental ratio falls. For that, in both the industries, producers will be induced to substitute capital by labor. And so we get expansion of the production of that good which has more elasticity of substitution between the two factors of production. Here it is explained that if elasticity of substitution between the two factors is higher in textile industry than that of the computer industry, then we get rise in the relative supply of textile. And if we observe higher elasticity of substitution between the two factors in computer industry than that in textile industry, then we get rise in the relative supply of computer. So what we find from this discussion? We find that the effect of an increase in the factor of production in sector-specific model is not unambiguous. If we consider increase in the supply of the mobile factor, then the impact will be uncertain because that depends on the value of elasticity of substitution. On the other hand, if we consider an increase in the supply of specific factor, then relative supply of that good increases in which that specific factor is used, but that increase will be less than proportional to the increase in factor endowment. So output magnification effect does not hold here. This completes our discussion. Thank you.